in this video, we're going to create a work file for our next video. And this is going to be sort of a review of many different things that we've learned over the course of this training series to date. Now, the important thing to understand here is that there's more than one way to do this. So this is just the way that I happen to do it in this particular instance, but you could attempt this from a couple of different viewpoints and get the same results or very similar results. So like I say, just kind of think creatively about how to solve these types of problems. Now to begin with, we're going to start with a brand new blank document. We're going to come up to our canvas and we're going to turn on our grid by saying show grid. Now you're not going to see the same grid that I'm seeing here, and the reason why is because if we come up to canvas, grid, and grid options, you'll see that I have my horizontal spacing and my vertical spacing set for 50 pixels and 50 pixels. I want you to go ahead and make your settings match what I've got here and hit OK. And then you'll see what I'm seeing here if you're zoomed in at 100%. Now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and create some shapes. So we use our rectangular shape tool, and remember to make sure that you do have the rectangular shape tool selected. And I've got our fill right here set to black. So just want to make sure that you have your fill set to black. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to start at one of these corner points, and we want to make sure that we're as aligned as we possibly can be, like so. And then we want to just drag over 9 spaces. So if this is 1 space, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and try to end it as close to that corner as you possibly can, like so. And this grid just gives us a means for aligning this as close as we can. Now, the idea here basically is that we want to duplicate this. And if you remember, there's a duplicate function for our shape. So if we come up to shapes, and we go down to set duplicate transform, what we're going to want is the settings that you see here, which is basically horizontal offset set to 0 and vertical offset set to 100. Now why 100? Well, remember these are basically 50 pixels high. So 100 is basically going to give us a 50 pixel blank space between each one of these that we duplicate. The rest of these settings can be set at default. So I'm just going to go ahead and say OK. And then if you remember, the duplicate command here is control right bracket. So we're just going to go ahead and use the control right bracket command by holding down control and tapping the right bracket 4 times, like so. Now why 4 times? Well, because if we come over here, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and that will be 9 across by 9 down, which makes us a perfect square. Now, what we want to do is we want to come over to our layers palette, select the top layer, and then hold down shift and select everything else so that they're all selected, and then just come over here and at the bottom and choose collapse layers, or you can use the control E keyboard shortcut if you prefer that. It's going to ask if we want to commit, and we're just going to go ahead and say yes, say commit all. Now what we basically have, and I'll just turn off the visibility of the canvas real quick so you can see this, we have these transparent gaps between these 5 bars spread over more or less 450 pixels. So I can turn off the grid now because we're not going to really need that for right now. So I'm just going to go to grid and hide grid because we don't really need that at this point. And what we want to do is we want to duplicate this layer. So I'm just going to context click on that layer and choose duplicate layer. And then what I want to do is I want to make this transformed. Now if you remember, our keyboard shortcut for entering into our transform tool is Shift T. So if I hit Shift T, you'll see that now we're able to take this duplicated layer and transform it. What I want to do is I want to rotate it. So I'm going to click on the rotate button, and then I'm just going to hover over a corner point and I'm going to begin to rotate. Now, as you can see right now, we can rotate to any arbitrary angle we want to. However, I want this to snap. So if I hold down shift, you'll notice that now it's going to snap at increments. So I just want to go ahead and have it snap right to that bottom corner, like so. And then I'm just going to choose to accept that transformation by clicking the commit transformation button. Now what we basically have, if we turn off these visibility of these bottom 2, is again transparency between these 5 bars, like so. And this is more or less going to allow us to overlap these 2 to create a checkerboard. Now if I turn the visibility of this on, and I don't turn the visibility of the canvas on, you'll see something really interesting happen when I change our blending mode from default to reverse out. Now we end up with a checkerboard, and that's all fine and well. But what we're also ending up with here is the transparency stays, but then we get white on some of these. And that may not necessarily be exactly what it is that you're looking for. So just something to be aware of when you're thinking about, okay, well, how are these interacting and what is it that I'm getting from these blending modes is pay attention to how we're getting white here. And the reason why is because we have two solids that are reversing each other out. Whereas here we've got transparency that's reversing itself out with that. So the bottom line here is that if we select both these guys, like holding down Shift and selecting both, and then come over here and say collapse layers, you'll see that now everything is either pure black, pure white, or transparency. So how do we fill these transparent pixels here so that we have white in those pixels? Well, we just come over here and we just choose our rectangular selection brush, and we'll just go ahead and hover as close as we can to one corner of it, hover as close as we can to the other corner of it, like so. And then we'll just go over here and create a new layer, like so. Drag that down below the rectangle 1 layer, and then just fill that with white. So just come over here, double click that, and choose pure white. Make sure that you do have 255, 255, 255 for your white, and hit OK. Then we'll just go to Edit, Fill, and Fill with Current Color. Hit OK. And now you can see that those are filled with white. Now, why is that? Well, because we have a white square behind this checkerboard, which does still have the transparency. So there's something else that I want to do here, which is to come back up to our rectangle layer here and go over to our select and convert to shape. Once we've converted that to shape, I just want to double click on that shape layer and choose to have a stroke with no fill, and then hit OK. So now what we have is a shape layer that's giving us our outer stroke to clean up the edges. We have our rectangle layer, which is giving us our basic grid pattern with this transparency. And then we have layer 1 back here, which is basically just giving us our full whiteness. If we hold down Shift and select all of these layers, and then come over here and choose to collapse layers, and again choose to commit all, you'll end up with one layer which has everything on it. And the background, of course, of the canvas is still there, but we have that turned to transparency for right now, just for the ability to see what we were actually doing with those layers. So in this way, you can build a checkerboard pattern very quickly and easily by just using some basic tools in Coreal Painter. Now, in the next lesson, I already have one of these ready to go, and I'll be opening that in case you didn't follow along with this lesson, and you'll have it to work with as well. Now, the bottom line, like I say, of all of this is remember that there's more than one way to do these types of things, so don't feel like this is the only way to do it. Experiment with different ways of making your checkerboards because it's a really basic thing, but at the same time, it's really useful to understand how these different tools will interact with each other. Blending layers, channels, selections, shapes. There's many ways that you could achieve the same result.